Paying taxes in France before the revolution was an act of pure madness. Imagine you're in the working class, also known as the Third Estate. By 1780, almost everyone in France was part of this Third Estate tax bracket. Farmers, ranchers, craftsmen, fishermen, domestic laborers. Everyone except the nobility and the clergy, the top 4%, were paying half of everything they earned. But when tax season comes around, there's no easy form to fill out. Instead, it's a painful, convoluted, outdated system designed to take as much from you as possible while providing exemptions and loopholes for the nobility. Here's how it broke down. First was the old regime tax. This was levied against your property. But if you didn't have property, under certain circumstances, it'd be levied against you as an individual. But not nobles. Nobles were exempt from the old regime tax. Then came tithe for church. This was 1/10 of everything you farmed. If you didn't tithe, you wouldn't get into heaven, and God-fearing merchants would stop doing business with you. Then there was a tax on goods, like a sales tax, except less predictable. It included things like tobacco, iron, and wine. And there was the 1/20th tax, which was supposed to be temporary income tax to help the French recover the costs from the Austrian War. Except the 1/20th tax kept getting extended by the nobles and never went away. And again, the nobles were able to get exemptions by giving gifts to the crown. Finally, there was the head tax. At first, it was levied against every adult citizen, and payment depended on your profession, except the nobility found ways to reduce their payments. Now, if you're a farmer, you might think a government tax collector would come to take your money. By taxing the public with such a lucrative business, France began using tax farmers, who were wealthy individuals allowed to collect taxes on behalf of the government. So imagine walking outside your farmhouse on a tax day, looking at your dying fields because the market price for wheat is sky high due to inflation. You pass by unmilked cows and broken plows because you can't afford labor to work on them. And you hand over half your money to armed thugs who are making a killing by saving the king's men the hassle of visiting your farm themselves. And to add insult to injury, while your farm is dying, your animals are starving, your family is going hungry, the queen is building a farm at the palace so she can dress up like a milkmaid with her friends and cosplay as peasants. The taxes you just paid are going toward building the queen's pretend farm on the grounds of the palace. It's extravagant, impractical, overpriced, since it was designed by the queen's favorite architect. Marie Antoinette may have never actually uttered the phrase, "let them eat cake," but she sure as hell didn't hide the fact that she was spending money pretending to be a peasant, while the real peasants were dying. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet.
Marie Antoinette wasn't the airheaded, decadent, selfish queen revolutionary history made her out to be. Marie Antoinette actually volunteered for public charity, tried to manage the crown's money after her husband was executed, and wasn't even a French queen at all. She was Austrian, which means she married into leadership over a country that had already been crushed by a century of unfair, outdated taxes. All it would have taken was one good public relations specialist, or a few trustworthy accountants, to tell her that building a fake farm while France's real farm starved was an imbecile idea and would get her beheaded. Marie Antoinette needed social mirrors, advisors who weren't like the rest of the backstabbing French court, people who wouldn't keep mum about her poor decision-making. Consequently, that's what today's episode is all about. Today we're talking about the mum effect and why the same factors that kept Marie advisors silent about her bad decisions are probably keeping your life mentors quiet. Myth 1. Make a list of all your friends. Who among them would tell you you're making a mistake? What if you're really excited to make that mistake? What if you're adamant about making it? Myth 2. Who's more likely to share bad information with you? Friends, family, strangers? What if none of them are? What if everyone's instincts are to keep mum? Myth 3. If everyone is so programmed socially to hide bad information from you, then how do we improve as people? How do we smash through the mum effect to find good feedback? We're going to get to our myths, but first I want to tell Joe about the Queen's Hamlet, also known for the most expensive version of playing house in the history of mankind.
I realized while I was writing this episode, this is all based on data from the book we're working on for the podcast. The mum effect, like it is everything in public speaking. I realize that I've used you, Todd, as a social mirror way too often. Like, you're finding somebody who is unlike yourself, but is sharp and can point out your flaws and how you're coming across to people. That's the biggest value I took away from public speaking, was actually getting feedback. And I think I've seen the same thing with you from time to time.
Well, I was horrible taking feedback until I started working with you. Probably the best advice you've given me, and you've given me lots of good advice through the years. I'm very oversensitive. I run on 100% emotion. And when somebody says anything that I find somewhat critical, I think that they don't like me and I think they're wrong. But after working with you on public speaking, and you gave me this advice, and I want to share this with our listeners. No matter how poorly some feedback or advice is given, there's usually some truth to it. So if you can just remember that, and the more it hurts, the more it's probably true.
Right.
Because if it doesn't bother you, you got to kind of weed through it. But there's always some truth in it. It's just poorly delivered, or not tactfully delivered, I guess.
Right. Okay, so I had a boss who fell into the mum effect. I had a boss at my last job where they were good at their job. Most of their job was scheduling and human resources. They rose to the rank of basically managerial, even though all of their experience was about private security and investigations. So like, they were ill prepared to do their job, and nobody corrected them. Like everybody around them just sort of like went with their poor decisions, didn't tell them that they were coming off as like stodgy and jerky and like
they do it all right, but this was not transferable. Their experience was not. It just didn't fit, right?
That's precisely it. And really, honestly, all they had to do was, if they had told us, hey, I'm not prepared to do this, or help me out with your scheduling a bit, or something. Like, if they had even like an ounce of asking for us to work with them, everybody would have. We were all I was working with a really good team at the time. Like, all of us were pros, and we could have helped, and no one did. No one said anything. Nobody even corrected them. And when I was reading about the mum effect, I was like, oh, that's that. Like, that's having a leader who, you don't help them correct a blind side because there's nothing in it for you.
I'm immediately thinking about NFL football and college football, because these head coaches become the kings of, and coaching, the women too, a lot of women's basketball teams, volleyballs and stuff. They've been doing this all their lives. They're ex-players. They've been successful coaches in other organizations. That's why they're the head coach now. But they get so isolated that they just make bad decisions, and no one's willing to stand up for them because they're the CEO. They hire everybody.
Right.
So they just let them, and their egos get the best of them, and they say stupid things. They get this godlike complex, and it doesn't matter if you're, a middle-level manager at a store somewhere. at the mall, or if you're running if you're running Intel, if you get isolated with and aren't willing to take good feedback,
Yeah.
and people aren't willing to tell you the truth, or you're just not willing to listen to it, right?
Right. Well, that's the other part of it is you mentioned you're not willing to listen to it. That is basically what I know. You've met him, and I'm not trash talking him. He'll never listen to this episode. But my brother, the reason why my brother never went to Toastmasters or took classes on public speaking is because feedback is hard for him, and I understand that as he suffers from depression like I do. And his mind is sharp and quick, and he can store a lot of information, but the inability to take that feedback means no one shares with him the flaws he should be correcting. And that's the poison in most of my family, is I've realized throughout the years, we're all very defensive. It's hard for us to take feedback, and there's nothing in it for anybody to help come along and mentor them if they can't take that feedback, if they can't be corrected. So that's kind of what the whole episode premise today is it really benefits us to find a social mirror who can look at our flaws and feed back to us, where we're coming up short and where we're not exactly meeting our goals, and what are these glaring, obvious things that, a stranger could help us fix if they talked with us for 5 minutes, but no one in our life does because, evolution-wise, there's no reward in it. Like if you are ancient man and the chief is in the cave talking about how we're going to hunt another mammoth today, and he is, let's use our spears instead of our bows, no one's going to correct him because there's almost nothing beneficial in it to correct them. Like there's no reward unless it is like directly going to save your life.
And there's risk in it too and of course in those times it was life or death, but in today's time of losing your job or losing a friend or someone not liking you.
Right.
I think it comes off as you're being criticized, and as humans we become over defensive. I know I do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And why risk making a boss or a friend defensive? I think that's really just like that could be boiled down. The episode could be over right now. We're just like, why make someone else defensive for no reason? And
it's not over yet. I got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Okay.
And the first one being, we're going to talk about Queen's Hamlet. So we're going to talk about the Queen's, Marie's, very expensive hobby.
Well,
okay.
Real quick, I want to remind everybody who Marie Antoinette is, and this is a very dumb thing to say, but everyone thinks that the last straw for the French Revolution, the thing that made everybody start beheading the rich, was Marie Antoinette saying, "Let them eat cake." Everybody thinks that there's this event.
Say what happened.
Yeah.
Why the timing of that was so poor.
So the phrase comes from and has become it's still used politically now. I think it was oh God, what was that celebrity? I think it was Ellen DeGeneres was on Twitter during COVID and was like, "I'm locked in my house and this is terrible." And somebody's like, "You live in a mansion." This is the today's version of "Let them eat cake." The phrase comes from the French Revolution, where the Queen of France, somebody comes up to her while she's in her palace, and they say, "Ma'am, the people cannot afford bread; they can't eat." And she says, while she's eating sweets, she says, "Let them eat cake," because that's how disconnected she is. Why can't you just give them some of the food that we're eating?
That totally reminds me during COVID, the thing Donald Trump's daughter said when people there was all these job layoffs and everything. She said, "Well, let them just start a business." That's exactly what it reminded me of the first time I read. And they just a total disconnect. They never thought of that,
Yeah, where would they get that money and the loan to do that? Yeah. No, there is
just do something else. Start a business.
As wealth gets separated in America, I see so many more and more each year. I see more Twitter conversations from the extremely wealthy that sound exactly like "Let them eat cake," except it's not made up. Marie Antoinette's phrase "Let them eat cake," that was never uttered by her. That was actually a publisher who was doing a French newspaper who was slandering her, made it up. Marie Antoinette didn't say that, but she totally did build a playhouse farm in the palace, and it was a massively bad idea. So her phrase "let them eat cake" did not kick off the French Revolution. However, her making a fake farm totally did. That is actually what the French people claimed was the last thing that they would put up with. So, can we talk about the Queen's Hamlet? Because I'm giddy. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I want to talk.
I'll study for this. The Queen's Hamlet is really amazing. You ever think about people having like really nice, elaborate doll houses? And we all, as kids, we played house, right? We all played games and played houses and played. But instead of playing war, I have so many other things she should have done with her time. Like, you know, you could play war, or you could play house, or make your own Shakespeare play with your friends, right? Not
Right,
her.
get into music.
They built, instead of doll houses, they created a whole farm of peasants' houses. But they made them very elaborate. So they were designed by an architect to look on the outside very rustic, very realistic. But inside, they had they had just amazing trappings. They had crazy, insane rooms, show goats wearing ribbons, milkmaids in like silk outfits. They used special milking. They had animals brought in, like props like you would see in Hollywood. Of course, the most beautiful of ones, and they would be, you know, milking them was a, you know, source of food in those days. But instead of metal buckets, you know, humble metal buckets that most people would use, they were made these beautiful porcelain things that probably we wouldn't be allowed to touch today, with gold lettering on them. And she would take her friends, and they would dress down, not dirty, but they would dress like the locals, who were, now keep in mind, there's 20 million, they're 98% of the population. And then from our intro, the real life farmers, their crops and their family and their animals were starving to death. So she's parading around this neighborhood village with her friends. Now, one of the big fatal flaws I think she made in this is she brought in actual people that live that life as like extras, actors and actresses, to stand around and to pretend to be working. Isn't this fucking crazy?
That is actually, I believe that's how the word of the fake French village got out. And
well, they brought in what they referred to. I got to say what they referred to. Simple people. See, that makes me want to cut somebody's head off this minute when I hear that. You know, the hardworking people that are paying for all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're simple because they work all the time.
Now, you and I, we've worked a lot of quote unquote simple jobs. Imagine being a craftsman, or like you are a farmer of some sort, and like you are living a hard life already, and you get lucky enough to score a job working on the palace, and you think you're going to show up and like, I'm going to garden their you know, bushes, like I'll make rose bushes for the king, or like I'm going to be, you know, doing these farm things, and you arrive and it's a village. Like they've built a mock-up of your French village. And
it reminds me of that story we did in an earlier episode about the trolls, remember? Where they'd have people come and live in royalty's yard.
Oh, yeah.
7 or 8 years, and they would let their nails grow long, and their beards would grow. And
yeah, the fake druids that used to live in,
and that's
rich
the
people's...
reason why we see those troll things in people's yards now. That's where it started. People, that used to be a real job that you do for 7 or 8 years as an indentured servant. They'd throw bread at you once in a while, and you would just be there for their amusement.
Yeah,
as a status symbol.
There are versions of this in the real world. There are like rich people who will like, I mean, like the Righteous Gemstones made a joke of it, but like having a private, what do you call it? Like an amusement park, having a private amusement park on private lands, but you are an actual amusement park operator, and they hire you to operate it when their friends come over. Like there's
like you wear the uniform,
right?
It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, anybody. I tried to look for who Marie Antoinette's advisors were, and she had advisors. She had nobility helping her, but the problem with Marie Antoinette is there was a gap. Like we said, she was originally Austrian. she was brought into French leadership. Like she was made the French queen at a young age. I think she was 14. And basically, like, she had no control over how the French saw her because she married a king who was the overseeing all these terrible ancient taxes that ruined the bulk of the people's lives. So
She was one of three daughters, and she was actually gifted. So two of her sisters died. So she was the last of the Austrian princesses, and she was only 14 when she was given to to soon be king. You know, he's a prince then or whatever. But so as a political thing to make their countries, Austria and France, get along. So she was gifted there. So she came into this system, but she did self-appoint a lot of people who were unqualified, friends and family and people of bloodlines, not of qualifications. So her inner circle was already a little, unqualified to begin with.
So if she had one person who was like good at running a political campaign, or if she had one person that was like actually qualified to run public relations, they probably would have told her, this is a terrible idea. Please don't make a fake farm for your friends to hang out at, and basically mock the peasants. Like that's what it was seen as, is, they're making a fake farm with a bunch of show animals and all this rich stuff and like extreme French opulence in the buildings. And they're like, why are you making fun of peasants? Like this,
pretending to enjoy it. That was the big thing. The happiness, the joy.
Oh, look at me. I'm working like a normal person. Yeah.
Oh boy. A lot of people in America play work today, so we get this. We get this.
This is the extreme version of, like you said playing like dollhouses, but I was thinking about those plastic toys that you give to kids where it's like the kid's first like construction set. Like it's got a fake plastic saw and the fake plastic drill.
Yeah, there's
and
the nurse and there's the
the little plastic stove you give to a toddler. So let's get into the actual science of this. I want to talk about the original study of the mum effect and why it is sort of an overlooked segment of psychology, and why self-awareness is basically becoming the new hotness in pop psychology. We've talked about her on the show before. There is a woman who's sort of leading the self-awareness charge. Her name is Tasha Eurich, and she wrote the book Insight. And she talks about this study where they wanted to find out, and this study was done in like the 70s, so it was around before her book, but she called attention to why it is important. And the idea is that people generally don't want to deliver bad advice, bad news, bad anything. And when you first sort of hear that, when I first heard that, like she said that during one of her TED Talks, and I was like, that's bullshit. I will deliver bad advice all day. I don't care about keeping friends. I'll tell people when they are.
Because you're the world's biggest jerk. I don't like it. That's the old don't shoot the messenger. I think that's a better feeling. I think it gives me the heebie-jeebies even thinking about it. I think of the doctor walking out saying, yeah, she didn't make it, so we did everything we could.
Right. Well, that kind of led me to think, like, how many friends do I know where it's like they're kind of a jerk, and so they're willing to tell you bad news or bad, when you're messing up.
There are a lot of those out there. Joe's not one. I'm just teasing. He's talking tough, but he's politically correct in delivering bad news as there is.
Well, but who is willing to take the time and the effort to deliver the bad news? And, is it something where like 50-50? Do half the people out there, are they willing to tell you that your dog died? Are half the people out there willing to tell you you have broccoli in your teeth? Are half the people out there willing to be your friend and say, hey, buddy, you are doing really, like you're not providing for your family correctly, or you need to work on your public speaking, or you're coming off as harsh every time you open your mouth at work. So like how basically we want to first say that this study was to find out how many people are actually not willing to deliver bad news. Is it really in our DNA to try to go under the radar, like fly under the radar and make nice? How much is that in humanity? And this study was eye-opening. Like it was like, oh, we are designed to be friendly and to not sort of like confront people for no reason. So the way they structured the study, is they would have 20 patients in a waiting room, and they would all be sort of like filling out paperwork and like working on something. They'd give them something to do. And while these 20 people are in a waiting room, the subject of the test, Glenn, would be on his way. And so the way the study would work is one of the researchers would come into the room. They'd say, "Hey, everybody, Glenn is on his way. He's the last piece of this puzzle. Once he gets here, we can get started with the actual research." Whatever, nobody knows why they're there to test. They just know that they are there to participate in a test of some sort. And so they don't think it's started yet. And the researcher says, when Glenn gets here, we're going to start. But you should all know, Glenn's family dog slipped out of the yard when the mailman opened the office or fence, and the dog was crushed by a truck. The dog probably won't make it. Somebody needs to tell Glenn to call his wife. And everyone nods. 20 people in the waiting room make uncomfortable eye contact, like thinking about who's actually going to tell Glenn. And then 20 minutes later, a man walks in with a name tag that says, "Hello, I'm Glenn." He walks into the room, he sits down, and he starts his paperwork like everybody else. How many people are going to give him the bad news that his dog has probably died?
I'm thinking 4.
4 out of 20 is actually pretty good. They basically found out that the most common reaction was for strangers to say nothing at all. And that it was significantly higher than 50%. The original test, I think, I don't remember what the exact number was, but it was like in the neighborhood of like 60 to 70%. And they got it higher. Like like when they changed the news, like did Glenn's daughter win a spelling bee, or did his mother pass her cancer screening? They could, by tweaking. Oh, and they tried it with females too. There was Gwendolyn or something like that. But basically, they managed to find out that they could raise the knob or lower it on whether or not the participants told the subject the bad news. And that's not really a good thing. Like it sounds so small and insignificant. This whole episode sounds like not giving somebody bad news doesn't sound that threatening or that bad. But if the results are you never improve in a small section of your life, if you never get a blind spot pointed out to you, then you're limited artificially. Like you're limited just by the nature of like people wanting to save calories and save risk of social ostracism by pissing you off. When we were in Story Master, did you ever meet that kid, Ricky, who told everybody he wanted to be a millionaire and date a supermodel? Like that was the goal of public speaking for him?
No, that would have been a wow. Like, what? He said that out loud?
He said it out loud. Yeah, during a speech, he's like, "This is my goal. Like this is my my destiny." And he was like, he wanted to be Tony Robbins. And
I wish I would have met this cat. That's crazy. Was he good?
No, that's the thing is, if somebody of your skill level had told me your goal is to own tigers, cocaine, and date a supermodel, I would have been like, well, what are you doing to get it? Like I would take it seriously. I'd be like, okay, well, what are the steps you're taking? With him, like he didn't have much charisma or magnetism, and so like he said that, and I was just like, well, that's just dumb thinking. Like I thought to myself, I was like, that is the thinking of somebody from a lower social class. Like you want those things, but you don't have the personality or the temperament for it.
It's like saying I want to be a rock star, but you don't play an instrument, and it's like,
right.
Whoa, okay. It's like, you want to buy a lottery ticket, or what are you talking about? You're crazy. Yeah.
And at the time, our group had like a bunch of accomplished speakers. Like we had somebody from like who worked at NPR. Like we literally had an NPR. He was like an editor and sound designer.
Yeah, we had a politician. You had a trial attorney. I mean, you had some some real good people in that club. Yeah, absolutely.
An embarrassment of riches as far as people that could give this kid feedback, and no one said anything. I saw Glenn. Like the point of this study is, like, we're like, yeah, a statistically significant amount of people will not tell you bad news if they don't know you. I saw Glenn in person. His name in this case was Ricky, and no one told him. And it was like, yeah. So if anybody had taken the time out of their life to sit down and mentor him, like an hour a week, any one of those people I mentioned they could have changed the direction of his life. They could have either made him rethink his goals, or they could have made him better. They could have set him up to actually reach them someday. So that's that. When I read this study, and when I
Do
think
you have
about
regrets that you didn't say anything? You were one of those Glenn people.
no, because I come from an area of writing and art. Like my background was in graphic art, and then I went into writing, and I started getting into contests. I don't have the time. I recognize that the biggest burglar of time I will face in my life are people wanting to be my friend and get feedback, especially if they haven't gotten to the level you're at. That sounds extraordinarily selfish, but you, as a creative person who wants to make their money in creative ways, you have to be very selective with who you give feedback to. I will give anybody feedback if they ask for it and they give me the thing they're working on. I'll read stuff. I will watch their speeches. But as far as mentoring them and being their friend and walking them through the steps in life that would help them, I honestly, like, if I did that, that's all I'd ever do. Like, I wouldn't have time for any projects of mine.
You have so many requests, and you've been burned before. You've seen what a time waste and time burglar it is to spend time with people who don't want to improve, just want to be your friend. And
absolutely. And there's really nothing wrong with that, wanting to be the friend of somebody who can help you or at least has a critical eye. There's an old phrase that, like, a writer is everybody's friend because they can understand what you're saying, or they can understand your life, I think is the way it goes. But yeah, it's, and I've kind of seen the same with you. I've seen you make friends with people who are like, that look like they have a fast trajectory, like upward trajectory of their career or their life, where it looks like they are a hard worker. And then you have discovered that they're not so much. Like they kind of lucked into their position, or they're in a good social class, or they got the right education. So I know that both of us have the experience of, we met somebody who really could have used that mirror, that mentor for a while, and we ducked out. We did not take that duty. We didn't inform Glenn of anything. There's a lot of this that is kind of also reminding me of modern days. Like, do you remember when Mark Zuckerberg went on Twitter and started talking about hunting his own food and cooking his own food?
Became a minimal survivalist. No,
yeah,
he doesn't seem tough enough. He's nerd tough maybe, but he doesn't seem tough enough for that kind of stuff.
There was a period where, like, it was specifically about hunting. Like he was posting on Twitter like his backyard barbecue, and like he would talk about, like, he's like, I'm only going to eat meat that I've hunted and killed and stuff like that. And it's like, dude, you're Mark Zuckerberg. Nobody gives it. You're pretending to be. Like this reminded me so much of Marie Antoinette and the fake farm. Like, this really was like, you're pretending to be a survivalist, and like you're going to survive with your own hands and stuff. It's like, no, you're not. Like, whatever you are doing to hunt, like, you are, I guarantee you have more benefits and more sort of like better equipment, better, people to tell you where to go, and like people to like queue you up.
Oh yeah, this is the one where the $1 million dentist goes on the African safari, and they tie meat to the back of a jeep,
right? So you can kill a lion,
and then lure the lion within 10 feet of the guy, and he shoots it for $500,000. That's what that is. I mean, it's a joke,
right?
I mean, it's just silly. And the same with the rhinoceros, bears, whatever they're after,
Right. So this is a wealthy person wanting to give themselves a narrative that's not real, because it would make them feel better. But in reality, if they had a social mirror around them, they would tell them, don't be a dummy. Like, stop what you're doing, rethink your life. To mentor you out of doing something that will have terrible optics. Marie Antoinette, like the thing I wanted to point out, and hopefully you can help me, the Queen's Hamlet was an absolutely terrible idea, but everything she did up until then was actually pretty good. Like the tax system, the way her husband ran the country, like everything. Like she did charities. Like, it seemed like she was actually a pretty good person right up until the part where she made a fake farm for her friends to LARP on. Am I correct in that?
You are, and she really did. She married into a shit show. So she was a young woman. I mean, she's 14, and she did a lot of things for the. She was a voice for the poor. She cared about the poor genuinely. I guess the situation of the country is a big thing. So when she came into power as being the first lady, for starters, France was one of the richest countries in Europe at the time. Okay. And there was 3 social classes. And the lower social class was about 20 million people. That was 98% of the population. And they paid 100% of the taxes. So the other 2 social classes, the one social class was very small. It was just the king and queen, the supreme leaders. And then there was the nobles and all the religious leaders. So there was 3 classes. Now the lower class, who was paying for everything, got no resources from it. So they all got together, the 3 classes. And the one that was 20 million people was represented by it. It had its representatives of the poor class, which this sounds good, right? This sounds like it's progressive. They get say.
This sounds crazy. Like, okay, in modern terms, this would be like all of the workers in America electing one person, like just like Joe Plumber, to represent all workers. And then like all religious leaders, all the churches got together and they got one cardinal to represent the church.
I'm not sure how they even picked that out. That had to have been kind of a weird thing. You know what I mean? Because that's a somewhat of a political move, right? You represent 20 million people, but you're a nobody still. Yeah, you didn't have any power, really.
You're the union leader of literally every worker in the country.
But you're poor. You're not. You know what I mean? Usually you're... It's very odd. So they all got together. So right now, the big problem... So France was warring with England. So they were supporting the American Revolution. This was a money pit. Now they say of $1.5 billion in the late 1700s. I don't know how much that is in today's money, but it's a lot more, right? So they all got together. But the king class and then the noble class, they kind of liked the way things are. They had that old saying of, I kind of like how things are right now.
Right.
And the poor class said, this is going nowhere. It's time to break up, right?
There's one thing I would like to interject. When we talked in the opening of the episode, we talk about all the different taxes. The reason France had like 9 different types of tax is because when we pay tax, we pay federal and we pay state. And our state goes to the state house, our federal goes to the Washington, D.C. or whatever. And then they distribute the money how they will. The tax system back in France was like you paid the clergy with a tithe, like 1/10 of everything, for God. And then there was also another tax where you like gave them food and stuff. And then there was a tax to the king. And then there's another tax to the king. And then there's another tax to the king for war that never actually ended, even though it was supposed to, like, that was a temporary tax. So like if you're imagining that, one corrupt like sheriff of Nottingham from Robin Hood comes by and takes all your money, that's not the case. It is you just get hit with taxes so often, so frequently, and from so many sides that half of all of your money, no matter what you did for a job, if you're in the lower 98% of people, you got hit 9 times in a year from all sides, or you'd have thugs show up.
And that Robin Hood example is a good one too, because it wasn't fair, and the tax collectors, there wasn't any accountability with them, so they could hit you more than once. It wasn't fair, and it was suffocating. They literally took everything you had, that you were starving to death. Now the government that she walked into, in 10 years, they had 3 different constitutions and 5 different government structures. So if that doesn't tell you that just things were a mess, that they had plenty of resources, it just wasn't being distributed well. And I do see why they wanted to support, and we'll get into some of that later, but this is the mess that she walked into. So she married into some big problems.
That is like if you were on a ship that hasn't like gotten food or water for 30 days, and there's about to be a mutiny, and then suddenly the captain is like, by the way, I'm getting married. We just picked her up on the island 10 minutes ago, but she's my new wife. And it's like, you're marrying into a mutiny. You're marrying into a mutiny. You're going to get mutinied. Like, the writing was on the wall.
She did have a reputation, Joe, as being a high maintenance woman, though.
Yeah,
even as far as queens go. She was a big shopper even before all this went down.
So let's, if you're up for it, let's talk about the pros and cons of we mentioned Tasha Eurich and her book Insight. She talks about two things. She talks about unicorn sort of mirrors, like where she thinks you should limit the feedback you get to somebody who is a trusted advisor who has your best interest at heart, but that they won't pull punches. Like if you're thinking, I'll just go to my wife or my husband, or I'll just go to my, my closest friend and ask them to give me the feedback I need to make me a better person, they may have the best reasons to not tell you those things because they're so close to you. Like they risk a lot by telling you what your blind spots are.
And they still love you too. I think they have the parental, or they have that partner love, that they like you so much that, yeah, those are true, but you're so good at other things that, that's how I feel. Like, yeah, that is true, but I'm not trying to make you perfect. And
so the part of Tasha Eurich's research or advice, this part I don't like. She frequently flips back and forth between talking about studies, and then she'll talk about like her business coaching service for a chapter, or like she'll talk about kind of her opinion. So like some of it I will sort of take or give her, leave it or take it as you will. The one that she says, where she says you should limit it to one person who you meet every week, and don't clutter yourself up with too many people giving you feedback. Just have one trusted advisor who is good at it, who has your best interest at heart, but isn't too soft-handed to like not give you the hard news. I go the opposite way a little bit because I come from a creative background. I say get feedback from a lot of people. Do it like Socrates. Like talk to as many people as possible who are qualified enough to give you feedback in the area that you're looking at.
I think the latter there too is how many. There's not going to be one or two people that are qualified to speak about everything.
Right.
I talk to you about certain things, and I talk to other people about other things. I talk to things that you're an expert at, things that you have less experience in. I'm not going to bring up to you, but.
Right. Business and social stuff I take to you, Todd. And then if it is something where it's like deep creative stuff or things about structuring my life so that I don't get burnt out, I go to other people. I go to friends who are professionals or that have the experience to talk about it. We had an episode long ago about mentorship. And one of the things that we covered in that episode were studies saying that you shouldn't go to a mentor who is very old and wise and who has been in the business forever. You should seek somebody who is about 6 months ahead of you in your profession. So if you're looking for someone to point out, here are the flaws for you as a person, pick people who are old, wise, and who have your best interests at heart. If you're looking for somebody to help with your business or your profession, find somebody who's just a little bit ahead of you.
And I found that to be so true. And what happens is people forget all the pain points of their business or their relationship things. When they've been doing it too long, they've got their 10,000 hours, they're such an expert, they kind of they'll dismiss those feelings. And they had them too, but they've forgotten those pains.
Yeah.
So someone from 12 months ago will remember it, and they'll know how to maneuver it. They'll be able to empathize, and they'll be able to show you action. And also times have changed too. And the challenges are a little bit different for a newer, whatever, let's just say in business. It's a more competitive place now, and cost per lead's up and labor costs more. And so there's a lot of times they really can't relate, that they're on a different planet at this point.
Absolutely. That is the age of the person you're talking to and how long ago they ran a business. That is so relevant to getting new information and like up to date and figuring out where to go next. I mean, if you're talking to Warren Buffett about how to invest your money, all of his information comes from a time when index funds were the best way to go. Like you'll get totally different advice depending on how new into the business they are. But on a personal level, like if like I was talking about the guy that showed up at our public speaking club and sounded like a mad person because he was like, I want to be rich and date a supermodel. He would have so benefited from having a large diversity of people who are willing to give him bad advice. Same for me. The best advice I ever got about creative work was to get a better head for business. I went through almost all of my sort of creative career thinking that all I would have to do is write or draw or whatever I'm doing, just be very creative and very skilled. That is not the case. Like the people who I've talked to in life who have taken me aside and been like, you're lacking in these business areas. You need to know how to run this like a business. You need to be able to market yourself. That's the better advice I got. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have people who were good social medias for me.
That's funny because I had the exact opposite. I thought it was all marketing and all and investing and the opposite. Instead of working on getting better and working on my skills, I thought you could just be like your friend was, or like the guy who was in that club with you, and think, well, if I just market myself, people will buy me and people will like me.
Yeah.
And that's not true. You need both. It sounds obvious, but it isn't. And a lot of people fall into that. They just think that, and that's why I think, and I hate coaching because it sounds kind of spammy now, but you got to get coached up on everything. For this show, we've worked with a vocal coach who has done wonders for us.
Yeah.
They identify, her name is Leslie. She's a great, I'd recommend her to anybody. After an hour class with her, you're exhausted. But Joe and I realized that we didn't even know how to read properly. I mean, we were blind to it. Things that we thought we had a pretty good grasp on, we found out that we were in elementary school, and now we're probably in high school. But if you get coached up by pros, when you go out and hire someone with, like I have right now for my voice coach, I'm taking singing lessons, and my coach is a opera singer. So I listen to him. I'm there to learn and get better. So you're already kind of putting yourself in that position as a subordinate, as you're going to listen to them. And I think that's important.
Yeah. I think that you're 100% correct. It's getting a diversity of opinions, but that are still relevant. Like you said, the voice coach thing, that is such a good example. It's you and I came together and it's like, oh, I have the creative background, you have the presentation and the marketing, but that was such a blind spot for both of us. Like I was like, I didn't even think about what words we were inflecting. Like that was so strange. So let's break that down as like, here are the 3 different styles of social mirror that you're looking for. You can look for Tasha Urich's unicorn style, which is find the one person who is going to have your best interest at heart, take them aside, tell them, here's when my presentation is. I want you to listen to it. Or here's a video of me presenting, or here's I'm about to give a speech in front of the board or in a room or in a class. Whatever you're doing, give them access to it. Let them see you do the thing you want to improve on. And then tell them, I want a lunch per week with you so that we can have check-ins and so that you can help be my mirror. And so you can tell me where I'm looking harsh, where I'm being too soft, where I'm, being too protective. That's one style. That is the one mirror, one person, one unicorn. You can do it like what we talked about, which is basically the Socrates method. Meet lots and lots of people, intentionally go out of your comfort zone to find people who tangentially relate to your blind spots, like a vocal coach, which we didn't think about. Singers, we're not singers. I mean, now Todd is, but I found people who were in business, and I'm not a business person. I'm a creative writer. So find people who are outside of your sphere, who are tangentially related. Get as many free opinions as you can. Todd keeps paying for classes. I go to speaking groups and Clarion style writing groups. I try to get it for free, but it's whatever benefits you the most. And then the third style that we haven't quite covered yet is
well, and you get better at it too, Joe. I think once you kind of let your guard down, and then once you see the results, the people that we've worked with on public speaking and presentations, a lot of them, they fight so much, but when they actually get the feedback from other people, how good it was from their bosses, from their spouses, from their coworkers, from people in their friend group, then it has credibility. Then you have credibility. Then they're willing to listen a little bit harder. So once you get used to saying, okay, I want to get better. I'm getting ready to listen. I'm going to set my feelings aside. I sought these people out. I'm going to follow through. Once you start getting the results, you think, what other parts of my life can I improve in?
Yeah. Seeing people get fast results and then thinking about how much you want them yourself. Like I've gotten jealous of people I've seen who are doing this. Like they'll have me and 5 other people on tap that they are getting advice from to improve their career. And I'll just be there to help them with, like, here's how to structure a story in a very small, simple way so that your boss will listen to you. But they'll have 4 other people they're working with, and they will rapidly improve and
It's scary, right? That
get
snowball.
upgraded.
You're like,
Yeah.
they're becoming a monster right before
Right.
your eyes. Yeah, I've worked with someone, Joanne, my wife's that way. I mean, she kept getting better and better. It's just slow and steady, and you're like, oh my goodness, she's going to be a beast, and she is now, you know?
Yeah, the last speech I heard her deliver, that was amazing. Yeah, and the it's ironic you mentioned Joanne. The one that we're sort of dancing around is pairing up with somebody who is skilled, and then in Lyndon B Johnson's case, we used him as an example in one of our episodes. He paired up with Lady Bird Johnson, and she was really, really good at public speaking, and she kept giving Lyndon Johnson advice anytime he would give a public speech, or anytime he would give a political presentation or something that was public, or at least to where she could hear it. He'd call her, and there's some really fabulous and kind of adorable recordings of him saying, yes ma'am, as she tells him, you're speaking too fast, you seemed flustered, you were out of breath in this section. So,
Well, and Lyndon B Johnson, if people don't know the history of him, he is a difficult man, to say the least.
yeah, he's a maniac.
But when it came to his wife, Lady Bird, and you listen to the audios in one of our previous episodes, it's hilarious. She's reading him the riot act, and he is yes ma'aming her, Texas tough guy, and she's just so. And that was a time, a more sexist time, right? The mid '60s, late '60s,
Right.
that women didn't have a lot to offer, and he knew better. So I think that's another thing too. Recognize somebody who's better than you at something, and then telling them that and saying, "Hey, I need what you got." Lyndon B Johnson did that with his wife.
And it doesn't take as much as it. The thing we're trying to hammer home is a social mirror is they take less time and effort than being a mentor. If you have 5 good mirrors, that's as good as one really amazing mentor, but it's quicker and it's cheaper, and you can just ask people, I need 15 minutes of feedback, and that is a lot easier to swallow than I need you to help correct my life and follow me around for months at a time. Now, I didn't want to end this episode with just saying, isn't Marie Antoinette a silly young girl who screwed up the fall of a nation? Or who was, said something like, let them eat cake. I know we've already kind of diffused that one or busted that myth. But can we sort of break down how bad the PR for her was? Like, when we say she had no social mirror, there was a reason. Like, she kind of had a country ganging up on her, and she was like, she had her advisor, or her advice and like, her resources were being chipped away, right?
She was. And, she was married at 14, and she was from another country. She was kind of gifted into this life. And yeah, she, like any princess or queen, she was an elaborate dresser. A lot of the people around her were appointed for her too, important positions. So it was not just her. She had zero experience doing this, and not a lot of family support because her family was in another country. She was blamed for talking her husband into the $1.5 billion investment that was the American Revolution. But historians have said it's very unlikely that the king would have listened to her. It's very unlikely. And the tax system crime, the greed was widespread through all the nobles and the religious people. The greed was in those 2 upper classes. It was not just one woman. Now, she tried to flee the country when things got really bad with her husband. It was said that she tried to stay, and he insisted on going. And he was beheaded because of this. She was tried for treason with less than 1% of the evidence they had on her. Her husband had over 35 charges of treason and different things he had done. They had nothing on her. But they humiliated her at the end of her life. She was put in a cell with full visibility where she would barely eat and had to go to the bathroom in front of other people. But the one telling thing to me about this, and what I want to take away and end the show on this, was when she was going to have her head, to be decapitated, to be executed. She apologized to her executioner when she stepped on his foot a moment before she was beheaded.
Wow.
Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake." In fact, the famous phrase was most likely written by her political adversaries who were hell-bent on enraging the public into beheading her. However, Marie Antoinette was absolutely guilty of spending vast amounts of money on a private little getaway on palace lands, which allowed her to pretend to be a peasant. She and her friends wore milkmaid outfits made of extravagant fabrics that could have purchased real farms and carried porcelain buckets to milk prize cows wearing ribbons. This is the sort of tone-deaf behavior that contributed to her eventual execution. And if Maria had kept a qualified social mirror nearby at all times, she might have eventually escaped back to Austria. A good social mirror can help you sand away those rough edges of your personality. They can help you tone down your annoying laugh, or help you appear less stern in front of colleagues, or give you advice on your appearance. A qualified social mirror can be the difference between being promoted to a corner office or being stuck in the cubicles because you're not a good social fit. A qualified social mirror can help you become the leader of a revolution, or having your head be the first one that lands in the basket. You've been listening to the Re-Engineer You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, feedback, and blog articles for each of our episodes.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.